thank you all for checking out this week's episode. Once again, I'm John. If you like what you heard and saw today, subscribe to our YouTube channel, find us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter, and check out our brand new merch store with hats, coffee mugs, t-shirts, other cool stuff coming down the pipeline. Again, thank you all for support. Be safe and see you next week. How's it going, everyone? John here, the host of Spirit Talk, and today we're welcoming the incredible Jeff Clark to the show. Jeff is a 12-year United States Air Force veteran, including stints and operations Enduring Freedom and Iraqi Freedom. He is also the podcast host of Course of Action, and he is the author of the incredible new book, Hear These Truths, The Ultimate Guide to Building Your Leadership Algorithm. Jeff, it is great to have you on here.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate the invite.
I kind of want to get started too. Before we dive into the book and your life and career, one of the reasons I came across you, and it's super fascinating, like one of the really cool things about social media, specifically Twitter and Instagram, the writing community out there is so supportive of other people. And obviously other veterans are going to stick to veterans, or cops are going to support cops. And I get that. But when it comes to the actual, how I came across your page, obviously our mutual friend, Eric Bishop, who's been on the podcast, Jason Piccolo's been on the podcast, Steve Stratton, people like that were sharing your new book, Hear These Truths. And I was kind of blown away. It's like, sometimes you look at that and you're like, is this real? Is this just an author being an author, kind of create some good juju for his book coming out or her book? But it was awesome because everyone's generally excited about this book. And I think it's one of those things where I'm kind of like, I need to have Jeff on, because if my friends are reacting this way, I'd love to be friends with Jeff and to get to talk to him. So again, thank you.
I appreciate that, man. Yes. Social media is a beautiful thing when it works.
Yeah, no, it's again, it's one of those things too where it's like I saw the hashtag where it's like authors of Twitter, and I'm starting looking at it, I go, who's this what's this book on leadership coming out? It's specifically during a time the last couple of years where this idea where I've met and come across a lot of people that are leaders. I've seen people grow into the leadership position, whether it's a stay-at-home mom or dad that had to adapt to the pandemic, or just other people who just excelled and had to stick or just kind of stand out and do something better. And I've also seen leaders that we put on this pedestal or vote into positions where they lack the leadership. And it's, again, I think this book is coming out at the right time.
Yeah, well, thank you. And I couldn't agree more. Yeah, I think there's always a good time for leadership, but there just seems to be, in the landscape of our country, the last maybe even decade or more, it's been troubling, and it's kind of been, what's the flavor of the day going to be? What are we going to be in for the next 4 years? And it's just, it's troublesome. So I think, going back to what you said about the author community, and we support each other. I've read Eric's early stuff. I've read Steve's early stuff. I give endorsements when I truly believe in something. I don't try to sugarcoat. And they were really, really awesome to support me, and they didn't have to. And especially with them being in fiction, and I'm in nonfiction right now. Doing that was just, they're good. They're good dudes.
It's when the pandemic hit, from your leadership background, obviously the time in the Air Force, and I would consider you are a leader. Did you find your definition of leadership changed through the course of the pandemic when the world shut down, and obviously with 4 kids and a wife? And how did that role as a leader in your mind kind of change in terms of your family and friends or other coworkers looking up to you more to be like, hey, Jeff, like, what's going on? Like, we need some sort of guiding light here.
Well, from a family perspective, I was home more because I was working from home. Because of the pandemic, I wasn't in the office most of the time. So I kind of became, a hybrid stay-at-home dad, professional, and then school teacher, because my kids got sent home at one point in time too. So, I was going from office to living room to kitchen and MacBook and Chromebook, and I was hopping around and still trying to write. So I kind of I had to adapt, and that's the big thing about leadership is adapting. And I think from a professional standpoint, it was more so looking people in the face saying, we're going to get through this. We're going to work this out. this will pass. We're going to be flexible and nothing's going to change. We're just going to have to adapt in the way we do things. And with the government, when government work, telework and remote work used to be a naughty word. People you didn't say that. It just wasn't acceptable. But when they embraced it and they realized we're getting the same results, sometimes even better out of people, and I haven't seen them in 3 weeks, face to face, it was kind of a magical light that clicked on. They said, maybe this is a good thing. And they embraced it and it worked.
It's one of those things too, where for me, I love the idea of whether I'm in the leadership position or I'm in a group where there's other leaders, or I'm just listening, I'm being a good subordinate in terms of making sure the mission, whatever our task is, to get completed together. And the idea of not being, for those first 6, 7, 8 months or so, not being in a room with those people, where you had to start using Zoom, or you had to start, like you said, this telemarketing where it's like conference calls and FaceTime. It's like I kind of lost, which is kind of the reason why I started my podcast, is because I felt like I didn't want to lose that eye connection between people. And it was interesting to see people kind of become leaders in a world where, for that first year of the pandemic, there was nothing happening. It was just people sitting online, whether it's bitching about this or that,
Mm-hmm.
or just feeling sorry for themselves, or maybe they had great reasons to be mad, whether it's the healthcare or there's no one's giving answers. It was super fascinating how the leadership kind of that you talk about the leadership algorithm, obviously, in the book, but the definition of the actual what a leader meant kind of evolved in real time. It was really interesting to kind of see that.
Yeah, and I think that first year was tough because we were told by all the experts, all the people in Washington, like 14 days, 14
Yeah.
days, next 2 months, and it just kept inching down the road. We were just kicking that can down the road. And I think that was hard for a lot of people to understand because it was like, this is supposed to be over. you know why am I'm not going to try to get used to this because it's not supposed to take this long. And that's tough for people to understand and for people, leaders to deal with, because they're echoing the things that they're being told. Hey, 2 weeks, hey, 2 months, we're going to be good. you know and then it turns into a permanent thing. And now they're talking about a second pandemic, and we're talking about masks at work again because things are starting to break out. There's a guy in my office the other day that had COVID, and I was like, come on, bro. Like, geez, like I'm trying to stay away from this mask thing again. But I think it's just, it's adapting. And instead of complaining about the punches, you know, not, you don't have to like them, but they're going to happen. And if you know they're going to happen, you can kind of back away from it and absorb the blow a little bit, and you understand it better.
You just mentioned the idea that leaders, when they have to echo chamber some of this stuff, they get the flack from their subordinates and people below them. It's like, man, you're supposed to lead us. It's like, it's super interesting, I guess, to see leaders or people you perceive as leaders to break under that pressure, or leaders that take that, be like, you know what? And I love how you gave a whole chapter about this, but you can fail being a leader and it's okay. And this idea that, uh, admitting to the failures and just like everyone has this conception, at least I always did, where it's like it's always perceived as, if you're a general or you're a CEO, like you have to be perfect, you have to do all this. It's exactly the opposite. I don't want
Oh
that
yeah.
role, but I want someone who's willing to learn and adapt with me and lead from the front. And like this idea of not doing that, or you just kind of you just buckle because you can't deal with what's doing. So it's like, can you kind of touch more upon that? Because the idea of failure in leadership, I think, is so misconstrued.
Well, we fail more often than we realize. We're wrong more often than we realize. The difference is between hiding it and embracing it and owning it. Um, a lot of a lot of things have happened, and since the 9/11, the war on terror kicked off, there's been a lot of things that the Pentagon didn't do correctly, administrations didn't own up to, things like that. But they didn't own up to them. That was the problem. Failure is going to happen in a 20-year war against an enemy that we didn't know much about, and that were playing on their turf, and they didn't have home bases. They were
Right.
running out of caves and shelters and whatever they could get their hands on, whereas we were very structured. There's going to be failure. So, and in general, in business and in the world, as a leader, the best way to do things is to own failure and to say, I messed up. Because when your people see you do that, they'll understand there's consequences to failure. However, I'm not necessarily afraid of doing it. So when I go into something, I'm not I'm concerned with success. I'm not as concerned with failure. I know it's there, but I'm not afraid of it to the point where I'm always looking over here in this direction instead of looking forward. And that's just a for me in my career, I embraced failure. When I screwed up, I owned it. When I failed, I owned it. And I said, guys, it's going to happen. I dropped the ball on this, or I messed this one up, or it didn't get the result I wanted. I owned it. And I said, now I think there's some things we can do better. Anybody got any input? And then the team owns it too. And it's just a different dynamic when you do that. Some leaders walk around and say, I can't be wrong. I'm the boss. Somebody else is at fault for this. It's not me, and that's a bad dynamic and bad culture to have.
It's that interesting idea where you don't think leaders should always be learning, right? Or like there's stuff's always changing, the world's always changing, your environment's always changing. And it's like those guys that have that ego, or girls that have this ego of I'm the CEO, I'm right. It doesn't seem conducive to harboring a proper work environment where the ultimate mission should be, whether the company goal, whatever your personal goals are, put yourself in a position to succeed there. And again, if you have a question or stuff changing, or you're in the financial market and numbers and all algorithms are changing, all this stuff, is like, get a book and read about it. If you want to become a leader, pick up Here These Truths and learn about the algorithm of leadership. And it's like these people that get in their head where obviously this is a lot of ego. I'm the boss. I know what's best. No one's going to change my mind. I'm perfect. And I think that is the wrong way to look at leadership.
Yeah, I mean, because you're not the smartest person in the room. Just because you're the boss or the manager doesn't mean you know everything. Most of the time, you don't. You don't know everything. A lot of CEOs and all that, they don't have a background in marketing or a background in engineering, or they don't have a background in all those things that make a company tick. But they have to have somebody who does. That's why they hire managers and say, hey, you're my HR expert because I don't know it. I'm empowering you to know everything HR and to, you know, communicate my mission and my vision for the company through human resources, and that you have to do that because you don't know everything.
From a leadership standpoint, when you were in the military for the 12 years, and then when you went back into the Air Force as a civilian, did you notice what was the biggest change in leadership perceived or directed towards you since you now are civilian versus when you were in the military?
Well, people looked at me as a retiree, so they kind of looked at me like, okay, this guy's been around, even though it was only like 8 months difference. And then when I got put into a civilian leadership position, it was Mr. Clark, it was Sir, and it was like, hey, you don't have to do that. But in a way, I saw the way they looked at me. They looked at me as a source of, hope, energy, wisdom, leading. You see those eyes where it says, "Okay, tell us where to go, tell us what to do, how to move, so we can do that." Because you have a lot of passionate people who love their job. They just need the right tools to do it. And if you hire well and you get great people in, you need to give them what they need and empower them to go there and say, I'm just herding cats. You guys are the ones who are running the show. What do you need from me? Just because my name's on the front door or whatever doesn't mean nothing. I'm nothing without you.
One of the For me, like, I love the leaders like the David Gogans or the Jockos, and I love the very verbal, sometimes maybe even the aggressiveness towards it. But I also respect and I love the leaders, like the silent leaders, like my mom, as like she is not a very vocal person, but how she helps take care of my dad and carries on with her life, and carries a lot of these heavy crosses, where that type of leadership too, you don't have to say a single thing. I can look into that person, my mom's eyes, and be like, this is a leader. This is someone I want to follow. And I also have the same reaction from a David Gogans, who's saying, hey, you better run through your pain and all this stuff. And if you want it, you get it. For someone that's looking for leadership in their life, what's the best approach for those people? That do they just kind of gravitate towards that leader they're looking for, or is there a specific type of traits and people they should be looking towards?
Um, It's a great question. I would say my advice would be open to anything because you just don't know who's going to affect you. I'm a military guy. I love Jocko. I love all those guys.
Yeah.
Um, Huge source of inspiration. I love them. I follow them. But there's other guys out there.
Yeah.
Start with by Simon Sinek.
Yes.
Um, Not a day in the military in his life. Soft spoken, kind of a little nerdy, and I think he's from overseas. So I love him. His books, Leaders Eat Last and Start with Why, are huge to me. Just as big as Jocko and all them. So I would say don't look at what you want to look at and try to find that, but do not be opposed to something different, something that maybe you wouldn't normally go to, and allow it to do what it's supposed to do. And if it doesn't, fine, move on. But take what you want or take what you need from a little bit of everybody and enjoy it, because I've enjoyed tons of books that weren't written by a military member,
Right.
or a veteran.
It's always super fascinating too, because I gravitate towards those types. I spent time in the federal government, and so I guess my mind gravitates towards those type of people. But the people that aren't in that world, it is fascinating because you see leadership every day, whether it's the person at the grocery store, the guy at the gas station, the person you work with on the crew when you're touring the world doing whatever. It's like those silent leaders. It's like they say words that are just as profound as someone that was in a
Absolutely.
foxhole. And I think leadership doesn't have to be pigeonholed into this concept of you don't need to be a combat expert. You don't have to be a terrorism negotiator to be a good leader. Now, I'm not saying you can't be. You aren't great leaders if you do that. But
100%.
even with that training, that doesn't make you a great leader either.
That's very true. There's bad apples in the military.
Oh yeah,
There's people in the military who are coming to work every day to do the minimum. It's no different than being, a civilian. We have our struggles too, but some of the best leadership lessons I've learned were from my troops, the ones who were brand new to the military or had only been a couple years that I was leading. Some of them taught me the best leadership lessons. And we have these 4-star generals and these full-bird colonels and these high-paid civilians that are running the military and the government. And I've learned more from people that I had an intimate relationship with in the work center, in a professional relationship, than I did, somebody with a bunch of brass on their shoulders.
The idea of leading from the front, and I for the longest time before reading your book, I was like, oh, you know what? Be a leader, lead from the front, always be the front. It's like, at what point though do the people you're leading become so dependent on you as the leader that you say, if God forbid, something happens to you as a leader, or you get taken out, or something changes, you get sick, whatever? Who's stepping up to the plate if they're so dependent on you as leading from the front? Is that type of mindset conducive to building new leaders?
I think it can be tough. I think you have to kind of weigh your options and look at your environment, and you really have to kind of think about it. And actually in the book, I have a 30 60 90 rule, and it's really important. Those first 30 60 90 days, you're looking at things in a certain way and seeing how and feeling things out. I think when you're trying to build a new leader, you got to tell them there's going to be times where you have to lead from the front and people are going to look to follow you, but then you have to turn around and empower them to keep going themselves. Because as a leader, your job's not to hold hands and babysit. Your job is to teach, to train, equip, lead, and empower, and then say, okay, you got this because you're the expert. That's why I have you here. That's why I hired you, because I don't know everything about HR or marketing or touring or whatever it may be, but I know you do, which is why I have you on my team. And that's why you're a part of this team and you're important. So I know what needs to get done. You tell me how to do it. You tell me what you need, and I'm empowering you. I'm still obviously the boss and the manager. I'm leading. We got time frames, deadlines, and all that, but it's a collaborative effort, and it has to be like that. I think people who lead from the front, it's a great phrase to say, but it can be almost toxic if it's taken too far, because then all people will do is follow, and they won't build their own brand of leadership and be an extension of you.
Right. I've had a lot of these guests on the show, specifically when it comes into like the self defense or like the tactical stuff, and all great people. And I always ask them, and I'm always so fascinated because I'm never that person that signs up to go to a leadership course or go to a weekend course where I learn defensive tactics. Like I don't, it's just not for me, right? But in a room full of those people who are teaching that, they're all leaders. They're all excellent at what they do. In the event there's a situation, I always ask them, if you 10 of you guys and girls sitting around a room, you're all experts, you're all leaders, who becomes a leader? Like who's the leader in that situation? Or do you guys all have that hive mindset where it's like, I'm the leader, I'm the leader, I'm the leader, and like nothing gets accomplished? Like, how do you break down this idea of a room full of leaders? How do you kind of knock back the ego in there to where help make sure the right person steps up? And kind of like you just said, where it's like your team is built on the guy that's good with analyzing numbers, the guy that's good with shooting, the guy that's good with writing, the guy that's good with interrogating, all these type of things. How quickly do leaders able to adapt to the situation, find their role instead of kind of stepping over the other leader next to them?
Well, I think a good leader knows when to kind of shut up and color. They know when to step aside. I've been in situations in the military where, room full of leaders, alphas,
Yeah.
and hey, we need to go. We need to go do this right now. And the first person to speak up, everybody followed. You have trust in your fellow, military men and women, and your team and your partners, and you move, and then you add when you need to, or you look at the dynamics and say, okay, hey, we're slacking here a little bit. I'm going to pick up the pace on behalf of the team. you know and you don't try to be individuals, you try to be a team, and if one person's leading you forward and it's working, you go with it. And again, if something's slacking, then you step in there and you pick it up and say, hey, I got this, let's go team, we're still rolling. I think that's a huge thing. It's something I learned, talking to some Navy SEALs and reading a lot of Navy SEAL
Yep.
books and special operators is, you know, they're individualized, specialized, very capable individuals, but they're put into 4 and 5 and 6 member teams. One person's designated as a leader, but they all have a responsibility. So at time it's time for comms, one guy's got it. They all turn and look to him. They know, your role. I think it's
Right.
really, really important to know your role and to never let your ego tell you, hey, whoa, come on, man, get up to the front. Your ego should be saying, okay, we're playing our role right now for optimal success.
It's like one of those things. If someone like you gets brought in to whether do like a TED talk type thing or going into a company, and how important is it for you to see how a CEO has clearly defined, not I'm not gonna say labels in a bad way, but made a role, each person has a specific role to make that company succeed. Like you must walk in there sometimes or just hear these stuff or whatever and be like, well, this person doesn't know what he's doing, so he doesn't feel like he's part of the team. This person's has too much workload. Like, how vital is it for you to realize, from the CEO standpoint, to clearly define a role for someone to make this whole team work?
I think roles and titles are important, but you have to have a transparency about them that they don't matter. Because
Ah, gotcha.
if you're a boss and I'm the boss, I'm the manager, it's on the door, I sit in a corner office. That's what you're known as. That's all you'll ever be. You'll be a consequence, not a, coordinator, not and someone who empowers them. So roles and titles are important, but they have to be able to be blurred to where you're a subject matter expert. I rely on you, and I think it's real important. Something I like to do when I've gone into some businesses and done some consulting, some talks, and the biggest thing I like to see is, how much does the boss talk? Does the boss say, hey, Jeff, welcome, come in, let me introduce you to the team, and then he walks around the room, introduces every employee or whatever, real proud of them, and then shuts up. Hey, these guys are the show. This is the show, and these guys are it. Or does he sit there and blah 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 about every single thing? Or does he step back and say, this is the team, these are my guys, and there's a big difference between how they handle it. And They talk to hear themselves talk, or they talk to make the point clear and then say, these guys can speak for themselves. They're
Right.
awesome people. They're powered people. They're accomplished people. They got this, and I'm confident that they do.
The other day, I was talking to a friend who's much younger than me, and he said something, or like he's going through a situation where he's kind of like a caretaker type person, and I go, man, I jokingly go, man, I would follow you in battle. Like, I just love the way you're handling this. He goes, well, John, you're more experienced. Like, you know, I go, it's not about you. Kind of talked about this. Like, you don't have to be this go hard charger, go getter, run through all the trenches. And you also don't have to be a 45-year-old grizzled vet who's seen everything to be a leader. And then as we kept talking, I go, man, you don't, and I said that, I go, you don't, the leadership qualities you carry, I resonate more with you now than I would with anyone that's been the foxhole, because I'm seeing it in real time. In my time, it's like, just because you're younger doesn't mean you can't be a good leader. And I think that the age gap there specifically, does that scare an older person? And I use older lightly. I don't want to offend anyone, but
Sure.
an older person that sees this younger person as not really a threat maybe, but they see that the other people in the company or organization gravitate towards this person because they're a genuine leader. Does that age disparate? Does that ever scare off the older people who are kind of maybe the top part of that organization?
Um, I think it depends on how they embrace it. It really does. Youthful energy and youthful leadership is a good thing. If one, you know to embrace it, and two, you know how to kind of control it. Um, the problem with anything new is that it can be overly energetic and could go a million different ways, and it's sometimes can be counterproductive. So, new things are good. Change is hard, but new things are good if you know how to control them. So when you introduce them, it can be effective. The last thing you want to do is introduce something new and it just go off the rails, and then people are looking at you going, what are you doing? What what the heck are you doing? Like, new policies, new things, and we weren't ready for it. You didn't introduce it to us, and uh, there's no organization, there's no rules of engagement, there's no structure. Like, where's that at? People will stiff arm that. They'll give it the Heisman and go, I don't like it.
It's one of the other things you talk about in your book too a lot is the idea of motivation. And again, to go back to kind of what we talked about, I love the guys that are girls that are screaming or just go like just want to make me run through a wall. And I love that feeling. But I can also accomplish my mission listening to a Bob Dylan song and still accomplish what I'm doing, whether it's cutting the grass or taking a person from a red carpet to their car to the house, like whatever that is. Can motivation, for some people it scares people because they can't really understand, or that doesn't affect them. Can too much motivation take away from a leader in terms of, like, you have to be able to gauge a room and each person might be affected differently by how you present yourself. And I think sometimes these people that are looking for motivation, or even these motivators out there, you look at their social media, some of the negative comments are, this wouldn't work for me. Like, this doesn't work. Like, you don't have to be screaming like this. You don't have to call me a slob. You don't have to say I'm a worthless piece of junk. And it's like, how do you as a leader find that balance for motivation? Because obviously it affects people differently.
So you really got to know your environment. You got to know your people. That's maybe the most important responsibility as somebody in charge. And when you're trying to lead people, you got to know them, because just as to your point, everybody in the room is going to be a little different. So you have to know how to motivate them all the same with different tactics, and you got to really learn what works for them. And I think a really good example is Mac Brown, who's the coach for the Texas Longhorns for a long time.
Yes.
They were going through a really rough season, and I think it was like one of his last seasons before they fired him or let him go. And it seemed like every other play, Texas would screw up, something would go wrong, and they'd all go walk into the sidelines, and he'd be clapping. You could hear it, you could see it on his face. He's saying, "It's all right, guys. Good job. It's all right, all the time." Every time the camera focused on him, that's what he was doing. And his players weren't responding to it. They weren't turning around and doing better. I mean, his players knew we are sucking right now. We can't do anything right. Sometimes you need that fire lit under you. You don't need somebody coming and putting their arm around you saying it's going to be all right. We'll get them next time. Sometimes you don't need that. Sometimes you need somebody up in your face saying, you do it again, you're going to be benched. You're going to run sprints until you throw up. Sometimes you need that and sometimes you don't. Some people use it for fuel and some people don't. I think you got to know who you're working with. And it's hard on really, really big organizations, but I've worked in big organizations and I knew who to really get into and I knew who to say, hey, you're better than this, and it's tough. Being a leader is the hardest thing to do in the world. It really is, because you don't know if you're right or wrong half the time.
I love that you brought up the coaching idea, because every time there's like a bad season in any sport, when they fire the coach, after like the interviews and stuff come out from players or whatever, the people that are the owners are always like, he's a leader, he's a great coach, I'd die for this coach, I'd die for her, whatever. And obviously it comes down to, you didn't win enough games. And I look at it two ways. I understand the need to win. Everyone should win. And that this doesn't mean whether it's a game, but it should be the best version of yourself every day. Compete to change what you had the day before. Whatever, it doesn't have to be a sport. And the idea of owners spend all this money to put together a team led by a coach or a GM or whoever to get wins and get to the playoffs and make more money. When they don't get to the point where they can make the playoffs or even win a couple of games or they get fired, and you see the players' reaction to stuff, it makes you wonder if the idea of a coach is, I would consider obviously a leader. If you looked up the definition of leadership, a coach would follow under that. When they get let go because they didn't get enough wins, do you think the perception of some people in the public or athletes, especially in college or high school, is that only a winning coach is a good leader? Like, how do you now, is that differ obviously between high school and professional, where obviously, like we said, the money comes down to a lot of these factors?
Yeah, I think the public does perceive it like that. They look at it like, he couldn't get enough wins, he wasn't good for the program, he wasn't doing something right, he had to go. And not all the public is like that. Some pretty hardcore fan bases out there. I know, especially here in Oklahoma, University of Oklahoma is a hardcore fan base. And some of them are like that. Some of them, form their own opinion, going back to Mac Brown, I think he's an awesome coach.
Yeah.
I think he's struggled with that recruiting class and that class of players to really connect to them. And that's why they had a poor season. And for the college football example, let's use it. There's been coaches who have gotten in great candidates, great recruits, huge recruiting classes, and they went 7-6, 6-6, made some mediocre bowl game. And it was like, well, you had a top 10 recruiting class. What happened? It's not necessarily the coach. Him and his staff have to adapt and connect with the players that they have to repeat success. So when you see guys like, let's use Nick Saban for an example, continued sustained success. Yes. Is it because he's hauling in a top 2 recruiting class every single year? Yeah, that's a huge part of it. Those players are only so much without the right coaching and leadership to take it to the next level. That's not taking anything away from the players, and it's not giving too much credit to the coaches. They've mesh,
right?
And you have to do that because you can bring in all the talent that you want. You can throw all the salary at them that you want. If they can't take what they have and turn it into success, it's still kind of a failure. And at what point in time are you okay with that? Or do you say, okay, we have to try something different?
Right. When it comes to your podcast, Course of Action, obviously it's very leadership centric. When you have other leaders on there, people, how often do you find yourself looking at something and be like, man, I never thought of leadership in that way, or how that person leads? Or is this something for you where it's like you go into one of your episodes and you come back thinking, man, maybe I wasn't a good leader, or maybe I was a better leader at this than I thought I was? Like, how often does that happen for you?
Man, probably every episode. I really try to bring people on that I'm learning about them, and I'm looking to be taught something, to find out something about their world and to better myself through them. And probably almost every episode, I walk away and go, that was interesting. you know Different perspective kind of changed my thought on that, or you know so I think doing a podcast is one of the funnest things in the world. It took me forever to get started because I'm so afraid of doing it, but
Yeah.
it's been one of the most rewarding things. I work on it all the time, it feels like. Um, but the purpose of doing it was to connect with people and to talk like me and you were talking right now, and to learn and open up a door to people to I maybe never would have talked to. I might not have ever have met you sitting here in my house, but have an online presence and doing a podcast. The next thing I know, I'm talking to you, and I think that's a very powerful thing.
Yeah, it's like kind of where I started too. Like I know I mentioned it, like just the fear of losing that connection with people, and this whole thing. Like you, it's like I never would have seen this book or read it. And I've had guests on the show. That I mean, I hate putting titles and stuff, national bestseller, well, that stuff where it's like I never would have found those books either. And I
Right.
love going through a bookstore, but I became so hyper focused on learning, like you said, the idea of every episode, learn something new. Now, obviously, I could kind of, you and I could cherry pick who comes on, but you're picking that person or that topic that you want to learn more about, whether it's wildlife conservation, whether it's leadership, whether it's whatever it is. And it's been so fun just learning to appreciate my actual love of reading. And
Hmm.
it's one of those things too, where it's like, again, before the pandemic, I was so busy. Well, you're never too busy to read, but I always in my head I'm always like I'm too busy to work. I gotta work. I gotta do yard work. I gotta do my security stuff. I'm too busy to read, but I do all that stuff now, and I still read more than I ever have. And I think again, that's what the podcast has done, where it's like I'm able to learn more. Like there's so many Jeff Clarks out there
Hmm.
that are that have just as unique voice as yours or mine. It's like, how do I get out there and learn from them as well?
Yeah, I when I started a podcast, I really said I'm going to bring people on that I want to know more about. I'm not going to look for titles or status or anything like that. And I know that's kind of important to viewership and kind of getting a return on your investment, blah blah blah. But I do want to know about people. I want to give people who maybe don't have a voice a chance to have a voice because they have interesting things to say. They have an awesome book that the world needs to hear about. And if I can be an advocate for that and give them their 15 minutes of help or shine, I want to do that. And you learn so much about people. And I've learned a ton, from the publishing industry to, leaders in different areas. And it's been really, really awesome. I don't regret it for a minute.
I want to the publishing for your book, Tactical 16 Publishing, their motto and their way they do business of if you have a unique voice, uh we want to help put that out there. It's like, how did you kind of settle on them? Because it seems like they let you be your own unique voice, and they support people who have a story to share. That obviously, when it comes to something like leadership, if you're a publisher and you turn that down initially, you're a fool, because we need more books on leadership. That's the problem.
Yeah, so Tactical 16, I settled on them because I went in, and I don't want to say settle. I think it's a
Yeah.
I turned to them and I agreed to work with them because I went to a lot of traditional publishers, and literary agents, and I got a lot of good feedback. Hey, the book's great. The book's great. Nonfiction is hard to sell. How many Twitter followers do you have? What's your social media look like? What does what does your website throughput look like? Because they want to know that there's going to be eyes on the book, and they have a better chance of selling it. Because they want to make money too. I'm not
Of
mad at them
course.
for that. Um, but I finally just said to myself, I'm going to find someone who appreciates the book for what it is and appreciates me. And I just started looking everywhere. I gave literary agents my stuff, publishers my stuff. I started looking around to everybody, and I just said, hey. um, and I lived in Colorado Springs at the time where Tactical 16 is headquartered. And I sent them an email. Chris reached out to me and said, hey, let's chat sometime. Like, what time zone are you in? I was like, well, I'm in Colorado. He's like, where at? It's like Colorado Springs. He's like, what? I'm just up the road. he's like, let's get together and chat. So we went to a brewery and sat
Oh
there and
yeah.
had a couple of beers. And he said, tell me about your book, man. And I wasn't ready for that. I was thinking, oh, we're going to go. He's going to probably just get to know me a little bit. No, he was like, I already know about you because I looked at your website, looked at your social media. You're a veteran. I'm a veteran. This is veteran brand business for law enforcement and veterans, first responders. And he said, I already know you. I want to know about your book. And put me on the spot. And I said, well, it's half written, blah, blah, blah. This is what I want to do with it. And he's like, cool, keep going and call me when you're done. And then I was like, okay. I didn't call him, admittedly. And he hit me up in like December of, I think it was like 20, 21, something like that.
Yep.
And he said, are you going to submit your manuscript to us? And I was like, I don't know. I don't know if it's done yet. It's over the holidays. He's like, well, you got till Friday. I want to see it. Make sure you send me what you have. I was like, okay. So I spent like 2 days working on this submission and all that. And I sent it to him and he calls me back and said, hey man, just want you to know, we're looking at books right now. We're going to be sending a contract your way. I don't want you to sit on pins and needles or anything. He's like, you got the best submission we've seen in years. So we're looking forward to going forward with it. And I was just kind of like, you know, they believed in it. He believed in it. He liked the voice. And even though it was half written, I need to do a lot more work on it. And he gave me the contract before I even came up with the algorithm idea.
Wow.
But the contract is what really made me go, okay, somebody believes in this. I've really got to deliver. And that's when the creative things just started flowing. And that's when I really hammered it out, because I had written about 55,000 words and canned about 20 of it and wanted to go up to 65,000 words. So I was just like, I was in full blown like butcher mode. I was just cutting. And he was like, no, I love it. You know, keep working and let me know when it's done. He's like, but we're going full forward with it. And I was like, sweet.
It's great to see that. It's obviously with the veteran-owned company, like they totally get that. I just love hearing stories like that because it's so in a world where I have these ideas in my head for books and stuff, and it's like again to have the backboard and support system of someone like Tactical 16 to help tell your story, or it's for you was there a lot of trepidation when it came to writing, or when the book is finally out and you obviously you get a ton of awesome like accolades, like this is an amazing book, but in the back of your mind, I assume you're someone like me where I'm like, well, what are the negative people saying? Why do I always fixate on what that one negative person's saying that, oh, you think you're an expert? What makes Jeff an expert in leadership? Why does he have an ego to put a book out, think he's a leader? It's like, how do you kind of micromanage those thoughts in your head as you kind of push forward and stuff?
Well, there's always going to be people who don't like you or don't agree with you. You know, when I finally started a podcast, I was like, there's going to be people who don't like this, people who don't
Oh,
listen. You know, same thing with the book. There's going to be people who disagree. That's fine. You can disagree. You know, the difference between people who respectfully disagree and people who angry disagree, you know, are the ones who write the comments on Amazon, you know, or they're mad because Amazon bent the cover. You know, I
it's
got
your
my
fault.
delivery and it bent the cover. You 1 star, but that's not my fault. So in my head, I just kind of go, I'm not worried about the people that don't like it. I'm worried about the people who do. I'm worried about the lives that I can affect and the people that I can inspire. If I didn't inspire you, I'm sorry. I wish I could have, but I'm not here to please everybody. Maybe I'm not for you. Maybe, you know, David Goggins is, you know, maybe somebody else is. Go find who is. Um, you know, and I'm sorry I couldn't, but I'm concerned with the people who want to value my time because I valued theirs.
Right. Yeah, it's awesome. It's like it's so cool to see you come through and do all that. And for as you kind of say, the book has been out there for long enough and stuff. Do you have aspirations to do another book? Like, are you always writing still? Like, how in 10 years from now, a lot of this stuff could change. And would you be inclined to go back out there and kind of tweak the algorithm? Like, is this algorithm for you in your head something that can always change?
Um, I think the algorithm, as in, you know, the efforts, you know, process and progress is pretty solid. I mean, I think that's a very good foundation. And I use the word foundation because foundations can be built upon, you
Yes.
know, so I do want to write more. I've been working on some fiction stuff.
Nice.
Eric Bishop's a good friend of mine and solid dude. And he's given me a lot of tips. We've talked a lot offline of, outside of the podcast and email and stuff. So I'm really, really excited about doing that. This is not going to be my last nonfiction book. I can promise you that.
It's great.
Whether I get a full-blown big publisher, small publisher behind it, or I self-publish, I've learned enough about the industry from talking to other people that I feel confident that if I put out another book, even if I had to self-publish it, I'm going to put it out to the right people, because self-publishing is a very unique platform for your voice to shine if you do all the work that like a major publisher would do and all that. But you can control that with social media. You can control that with your voice. So yeah, man, I love to write. I try to write every day. I try to read and write every day. That's my thing. Even if it's just for 15 minutes, and try to work on some project. Sometimes I have too many projects going on, but I try to work on whatever's inspiring me at the time, whatever I'm feeling.
Before I let you go, obviously your podcast is everywhere. If people want to pick up your book, what's the best way to do that? If they want to head to your website, is that the best way to kind of keep in touch with you? Like, tell us a little bit about your social media and stuff like that.
Yeah, so you can go to jeffclarkofficial.com. From there, you can get all the socials. If you want a signed copy of the book, go to the website. You can subscribe, or you can hit the contact button and contact me. I'll set you up a way to get a signed book directly from me. Or, you can help at Amazon, Barnes and Noble. I think you can even go to the Tactical 16 website and get a copy. So it's available pretty much everywhere. But yeah, if you want a signed copy, go to the website and hit me up. I got all the socials on there as well. I'm on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook.
I love the challenge coin that came with it as well. I'll have to send out mine to you as well. But the little things like that, I think it's so imperative to, especially this day and age, to be creative in terms of like the marketing. And who doesn't love a challenge coin? And it was just really cool where it ties in obviously from your leadership to your military background. And it's a really cool thing. And the fact you leave personal messages in there, the bookmarks and the little notes, like the letter, it's I can't recommend this book enough to people out there. It's a great gift.
Thank you.
Yeah, I know Father's Day just passed, but I am actually gonna send a couple of books out to some fathers I know. And yeah, no, it's just a great thing to have you on here, and we'll have to do it again. But I appreciate your time today, Jeff.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me on. A big fan of Spear Talk, and man, I can't tell you how much I appreciate this.
How's it going, everyone? John here, the host of Spear Talk. You might not know this, but before I record an episode, I like to break a sweat. And I do that using the Chop Fit. Over the course of the past year, the Chop Fit has allowed me to lose weight, tone up my body, and feel even more amazing about myself. A feeling that you should all feel about yourselves as well. If you use this code, SpearChop10, you get $10 off your order. Once again, use code SpearChop10 for $10 off your Chop Fit order. It'll change your life. Thank you.